Hey guys, it's Justin again with another work in progress. This is for the high-grade ez8 that I'm working on as part of my Team Nexus build. You'll have to excuse my disgusting spray booth. I'm going to attempt to airbrush through this. This is kind of a step-by-step thing, if you will. It's been requested a few times that I do paint tutorials. I'm not really sure how to go about this. So I'm just going to kind of wing it and hope for the best. First things first, the color I'm spraying right now is Mr. Colors, I don't know how to pronounce that, Phthalo something blue. It is Mr. Color 322, that's the reference number for you. It's thinned a little more than 1:1. There's a little more thinner than paint. And I've got a nice little bit in my cup right here. And I'm only going to do shade lines right now. I'm only doing the initial blues. These are the parts that are just going to be blue. There's no actual color separation or anything on this. I mean, this piece is going to have metallics painted inside, but I think I'm going to do that by hand. I'm spraying it about somewhere between 5 and 10 psi, and like I said, the thinner the paint and the lower the pressure, the better for this, because you're gonna get nice, nice looking shading. So you just go in real gently, and you fill in your shades. Come on. There we go. And usually I do that a little faster, but I feel like for the sake of demonstration, the slower I go, the better. That way you can kind of see what's going on. I guess that's good enough. I gotta get this little front piece. Alright, and that's pretty much the procedure you follow. Smaller pieces like this one will take significantly less time. It's just a matter of, you know, getting in there and... Oops, that's really heavy. But, you know... There we go. And that's that. So I'm going to cut. We'll come back when all this is done and we will get to blending. Okay, we're back. All of our shading has been laid down like you saw in the first part. I had to go back and touch a couple spots up. Next we're going to go ahead and lay down some bright blue. This is reference number 65 by Mr. Color. Again, I just have a little bit in the cup, same pressure, same settings on everything as before, low pressure, thin paint. And the idea here is to mist paint on over so you can still see the lines that you've done through the paint. And you build up maybe 2, 3, maybe even 4 layers. So that these lines stay dark, but you can still see them through. And I'm going for a more subtle look, so I'm probably on camera going to make it look like I've covered all this up. But when you put it under a light, once it's flat coated and everything, the shading will pop out a little better. And you know, the way the flat coat works is it kind of separates everything, and it looks, it'll look better. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull back, you know, yay far, maybe about 6 inches, and I'm just going to pull back maybe about halfway on this and just let the mists or the coats build up, and I'll go from there. Alright, that's one coat. So if you wanted a very, very heavy shading, I wouldn't stop here. I'd go ahead and put another coat on this, but you can already see how the shading's starting to look. Let's go ahead and hit it with another one. Alright, so if you wanted very heavy shading, this is probably where I'd stop. It's blended pretty well, but you can still see the shading very well through. Now I'm going to put another layer on and we'll probably be at about a medium. So... there we go, a little more subtle. You can only see it on the harder edges, stuff like that. And I'm going to hit it with one more fine layer, and that is going to get me the effect that I want. And there we go. So you can still see the shading just a little bit, not very much. But once everything's done and it's flat coated and it's under a light, the shading will pop a little more because it'll have light on it from all directions, so you'll be able to see all the coats through. But right now, that's where I'm going to leave it. That's kind of where I'm happy, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and make a cut, and we'll come back with I don't know, something else. Alright, so here's what we've got. Once it's dried a little bit, it's got a kind of a semi-gloss finish. It's going to vary from paint to paint depending on what you use, but it's the effect I'm looking for. It's the color I'm looking for. I'm very pleased. So the next order of business is before you do any kind of anything, I don't care what it is, if you're going to be masking, if you're going to be decaling, if you're going to be panel lining, you better be panel lining your kits if you're painting. Don't let me catch you not doing it. The next step is I'm going to recommend that you go ahead and lay down a clear coat. You're going to want a gloss coat for this. This is probably my favorite thing in the universe when it comes to just in-between coats. This is by no means something I would use as a final top coat, but if you're going to do panel lining, if you're going to do decaling, this is great. You don't need to thin it, you don't need to do anything with it. You just put some of this into the airbrush and you go. So I'm going to load some of this in, and we're going to top coat these pieces, and then we're going to let them dry, and then I don't know, we'll figure out what's next. But first, the bottle needs to be poked holes on the top, so I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. Had to put some holes in the top of the bottle because it tends to dry up on itself. But like I said, this stuff is really easy to use. I'm actually going to turn my pressure up just a little bit. Gonna bump it up to 15. That should be good. I wouldn't spray it any higher than 20. And just kind of, I like to do like a thin, kind of tacky layer, and then I'll go back on a little heavier. So just real thin, real fine. And it's gonna look really like orange peely, and that's fine. Because then we're going to come back and we're going to go a little heavier, and that just kind of gives that slightly dried stuff a little something to grab onto, and it's nice and glossy. So we're going to hit all the rest of these with this. Really easy, like I said. Takes no effort whatsoever. And then you just let those parts sit I'd recommend at least overnight. But the longer the better, because it's going to give it time to cure up, and it's going to harden, and you'll have a nice surface to work with once you're finished. So this is what I recommend before, like I said, anything. If you're gonna start decaling, if you're going to mask off sections, stuff like that, you just want to lay down something to protect the layer beneath it. So if you make a mistake when you're panel lining, you don't pull your paint up. If you mask, you won't pull your paint with the masking. Decals, sometimes the solutions can eat at your paint depending on what type of paint you're using. It's just something nice to make sure that everything is covered. So it takes a little bit longer, but like I said, if you want nice results, you're going to need to take a little bit more time and get all this properly done. So I'm going to finish this piece, and we'll make a cut. We'll come back to the final glossed pieces, and we'll see what I'm doing with that. Alright, so I've got my my pieces glossed up. They look about as good as I'd hope. Again, like I said, Future is far from something I'd use as a final top coat, but it gets the job done for panel lining and stuff like that. So these are all good to go. Everything's all finished. Everything looks as good as I want it to. This isn't going to be all the blue on the kit, just the pieces that are going to be all blue. So I don't have to worry about going back and redoing anything or anything like that. So I think next I'm going to do metallics. I've been going behind myself and cleaning everything up, making sure all the nub marks are gone, mold lines are gone, and all that good stuff. So that's all pretty much done. I've got a couple of seam lines I've been fixing. Very important stuff, so you should make sure you do all that before you do metallics, because metallics especially will show off even the smallest error in your builds. So you want to make sure all that's cleaned up before you jump into it. So I'm going to make a cut here. We'll come back when it's time to prep for metallics. Alright, I'm back and we're ready for metallic paints. For my metallics, I like to lay down a nice coat of black primer first, so you can see, I laid it down a little heavy so it goes on a little glossier. That doesn't really matter, but I like to have a nice smooth finish. You don't have to use black primer, you can use gray primer, but whatever, I used what I used. The next thing, again, it depends on what kind of metallic you're using, whether or not it's necessary, but I use Alclad's Gloss Black Base. You can use any kind of enamel gloss black. This, again, like I said, it's not completely necessary. It just depends on what type of metal you're going to be laying down. If you're going to be laying down chrome or something with a higher shine, obviously it's going to be necessary. If you're not, it might not necessarily be something that you need to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and lay down this gloss black on these pieces, and then we will go to the next part. So I'm spraying again at 20 psi, and I try to get a little farther away when I'm laying down my enamel black, because it has a tendency to kind of splotch up if you get too close. But you can see a difference between the primer and the gloss black almost immediately. So So the next part of this is basically to let this sit and dry for at least an hour or so, just so the enamel has a little bit of time to dry up. If it's touch dry, you can go ahead and paint again, but other people like to make sure it's cured, so you might want to wait a couple days. I don't have that kind of time, so I'm going to wait maybe a couple hours before I start laying down the next bit. But I'll be back with that, and I'll see you in a second. Okay, so after your gloss black is dried some, I'm going to go ahead and lay down some MC2112 or 212. This is Mr. Color. It's Mr. Metal Color. The one I'm laying down is iron. I've gone ahead, I've actually laid down gold already on the pieces I'm laying gold down on. So like the insides of this thruster bell, it looks really flat right now, but once I buff it out it'll be shiny. So these pieces are going to be hit with the iron, and let's go ahead and see how that looks. I'm spraying at about 5 psi, maybe a little bit higher. And I think I'm going to just use Mr. Color metallics for this build, just because I like the way they look. I think it'll really kind of bring some uniformity to the kit. Plus I actually find them a little more fun to use because they're a little more involved. Because you have to buff them out, which can be a little annoying, I suppose, but and they go on kind of flat, but we will buff those out later. I don't think we'll be doing that this video, just because I think this video is starting to get kind of long. So there we go. So I'm going to stop for now. I'm going to finish the rest of these up. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed, and hopefully you learned a little something, and I will see you with the next video. So later on, see you guys.